do something a little bit different. Technically, this is Research, Rank, Repeat. I'm still one of your co-hosts, Alyssa.
And I'm technically still Hannah.
And today we're introducing a new format for our episodes. We've kind of briefly talked about this in the past, that we had wanted to cover some TV and some movies in a slightly different way than we normally do. And so, welcome to the first episode of Research Break.
Woo!
Woo! Fanfare! Ooh! Snaps.
Break.
Oh. Break. Research Break. So, yeah, our new, we're going to be releasing new episodes under the title of Research Break.
Yes.
Let me stop flipping through them so it's not in the background. I want it to be the right page, sorry. Research Break. So, essentially, this is the format we want to use to cover things that are not our normal, like, we're looking at something and we're ranking it. We'll do some ranking within the episode, but the general structure will not be that.
Yeah, very much like how we did our Legend of Korra episodes.
Right.
Because that was kind of a untraditional episode we had done. We just wanted to be able to cover... There's other things that we want to cover and other things like have discussions about that we thought would be fun to do, and we can just put out whenever we want to do them. So,
right.
Yeah.
So, technically there's another episode in the works, and I don't know which ones is gonna come out first, but today... I'm excited to say that we are here to talk about Avatar the Last Airbender Netflix live-action show. I don't know what the official title is. I wasn't sure where to start with that or where to end with it. There's a lot going on.
Yeah.
But if you've followed us from the beginning, we've talked about Avatar a lot. We also covered Legend of Korra. Clearly, we like the series. We really wanted to cover the live-action show, but as we did for Legend of Korra, we wanted to have a little discussion pre-watching the show.
Yes.
So, for audiences out there, today's date is February 17th. It's a Saturday. On next Thursday are when these episodes come out on Netflix. So, we're about a week away. We're really close. It's coming in hot. And we wanted to talk about it. We wanted to do a little pre-discussion just to kind of go over some things. How we're feeling, what we know, ask some questions. So, I'm excited to do that today, Hannah.
Yeah. I am too. I feel like just general thoughts to begin with. I feel like when this was first announced, I think we both kind of did the thing of like, because we remember how the live action movie was.
Yes.
And so I kind of got hit with, although they announced like this timeline of like, these are, God.
What are you saying?
These are the shows and like things that are going to be coming out in the next like 5 years.
That's Avatar Studios. That's different.
No. But, like, that was kind of, like... I'm tying it in because it's all the Avatar.
Okay, well, it's different... the creators...
No, I do understand that, but I'm just saying.
Yes, okay.
Like, because I had seen that, and then, like, the show was announced and stuff like that, so I feel like there's been a lot of different things coming from the Avatar...
Universe in general.
Yeah. That's what I was trying to say.
So, we'll kind of talk about that, because that's a question I have for that. So, just to give the timeline... So, several years ago, Netflix has said, hey, we're doing live-action Avatar. And we were like, woo. And they said, original creators are attached, they're working on it. And we said, great. Because they were really not involved with the M. Night Shyamalan movie that came out in about 2009, 2010. They really didn't have any involvement with that. And I was like, okay, cool, they're coming in.
Yeah.
About a year or so into production, the creators left the show due to creative differences. And then... about a couple of months later, it was announced that they were working with, I believe it's Paramount owns Nickelodeon.
Yeah, Paramount Plus.
So Paramount was going to be developing, like, animated Avatar universe with movies and television shows and tie-ins. So they're currently working on that. But they did have some involvement in the general creation of the show, but left due to creative differences. Right. So that's just the general timeline of, like, how these things... started and what timeline they started, and we're going to cover all of it because I have to cover it. Have reservations, but we're going to cover it.
Yeah.
So, I have some questions I thought of, and just some general thoughts that we wanted to share just before we actually watch it.
Yeah.
So, first thing I want to know is, how much do you know? how much have you seen? Because I know they've released at least 2 trailers. They've released interviews.
Yep.
They've done promotion. They've done a lot of promotion. I've seen some things, like social media-wise, interviews with the actors and actresses they've casted to play these roles. And I know that some people have already seen it, and there's some early previews, people talking about it. So just like, what do you know? What have you seen? How much information do you have about the show going in?
When the first trailer came out, I had watched it, but honestly, it's been so long, I don't really remember a lot. I don't honestly know much about it, more because I've been trying not to read too much into it. I have seen a lot of stills of, like, the anime characters compared to the actors and actresses, and I know there's a lot of, like, people who are unsure about some of the casting. But yeah, I honestly, there's very little I know just besides the fact that it's based off of, it takes things from the animated show. Okay. But yeah, that's pretty much all I know.
Okay, so I'm kind of similar. I actually didn't watch any of the trailers because I didn't want to get, I didn't want to come in with any biases. I've tried to keep a really open mind, and then every time I see something, I get a little like, So, I've seen the casting. I've seen all the people they've cast. I'm pretty comfortable with the casting. I think that seems fine. I will say, I know that Daniel Day Kim is playing the Fire Lord, who was Jin from Lost, Hawaii Five-0. I love Daniel Day Kim is great. Love him. He played Asami's father in Legend of Korra, so he's already been involved with the Avatar universe in a general sense. I'm happy with that casting, because that one I was like, Fire Lord's a big one. It's also interesting to me. I know a little bit about how the structure of the show is. So I know this season is season 1. So they're covering like season 1. Book 1 is season 1. I don't know if they're calling it like book 1 water like they did in the animated show, but I do know that roughly that's what we're covering. I know a few like very select things about like, this is going to be different. I don't know how that's going to play out. I've tried not to read too much, but you go on social media and it's like, oh, there it is. So I've seen some of the stills, the pictures of costume work and casting and stuff like that, but I haven't really seen any videos. I haven't seen any like actual shots from the show itself. I've seen one meme that I think is really funny, and when we get to a different question, I want to show it to you because I don't think it's like spoilery, but kind of like with you, I know a little bit, and I've tried to kind of, because I've seen a lot of people getting like worked up and getting freaked out about seeing certain things being changed, and I'm like, I want to take a step back. Yeah. I'm trying to not like look into it too much. So we're about roughly the same place.
Yeah, and I also don't want to go into it with like biases or like other people's opinions, because I feel like sometimes that can have an effect on how you view a show.
Oh, for sure.
So I kind of like to go into stuff like not knowing much, just because then you get to form your own opinions.
Right. So that kind of leads into my next question I have is, what are your expectations of this show? Like, what are things you want to see? What are things you want to see done differently? Like, what are your expectations? Just broadly, I guess we can start with that.
I had the same question for you. My question was going to be, like, what are your expectations with, like, in the back of your mind, knowing how the live-action movie turned out?
Right.
I don't know that I have many expectations, because I feel like when you go from a animated to a live-action, it's so vastly different in so many ways that I almost feel like having expectations is going to, like, either lead you to be super disappointed or it's not going to be anything like what you expected.
Right.
But I mean, I would like to see like the characterization that was in the animated show. I would like to see that shown in the live action, because part of the issue with the live action movie was like that the characters
so serious.
And they weren't the same as they were in the show. So I think that would be nice to see.
I definitely agree with that.
I think it would be oh my gosh. I think it would be cool to see some of like almost like shot by shot from like the animated to see how they do it in live action, just to see, like, I don't want the same exact show. Yeah. But it would be nice to see like some of those scenes, how they would how they would do it in an animated sense. Like we've said that with the Disney versus live action, like these scenes that are basically the same, how they translate them and how they make them into their own.
Right. I think that you bring up a really good point of comparing this to looking at how we've done the Disney animated versus live action, because it is a lot of, well, clearly a lot of those are really bad. So we've seen how you can really butcher a story taking it from animated to live action, and clearly we've already seen that from the movie.
Right.
For those of you who aren't aware, which maybe you're not because it's terrible, in about 2009, 2010, M. Night Shyamalan did a live-action version of this film. It was very poorly received. We did not like it. They changed the pronunciations of characters' names. They changed a lot of the story. The special effects were also, we'll talk about that a bit later, were a bit rough. There were elements that worked. Like, I liked Dev Patel as Zuko.
Yeah.
I liked the Fire Nation kind of aspect of that. I thought worked well, but I agree the one thing that I think really didn't work was the characterization of these characters was so different. Like, we talked about Sokka was so serious and so, like not him, like, not comical, not, like, fun, not in the element we liked.
I would also like to see them pronounce the names correctly.
And I believe they are.
Okay.
To my understanding, everything is the way it's pronounced in the show. Because that felt silly to me to, like, change the pronunciation. You know, like, that's their characters' names. I don't know why they need to be, like, a traditional pronunciation or whatever.
Right.
The other thing that I would really like to see is, I feel like if you look at Avatar the show, all 3 books, I feel like book 1 is the weakest book as a full structure. I think there's some really, really good episodes, like The Storm. I need that episode to be good in live action if they're going to do that.
Right.
Like, some of these episodes I think are really important to building these characters and setting things up for later books. But I feel like there are some parts that are a little bit weak. So I think something I would really like to see is we keep the same feeling. Like, I want, like you said, I want these characters, like, I want to see Aang's silliness and playfulness, but also I want to cover these, like, really heavy topics and make that balance in the way that the show, I feel like, did a really good balance of, like, setting up these character arcs from the beginning that are going to build. Same thing with Zuko. Yeah. That could go really poorly if they don't set it up right. Like, I feel like that character development is so important in the story. Like, probably the most important character development of any character. Maybe other than Aang himself, because he has a lot of character development as well. So I really want to make sure that feeling comes through. I don't need a one-to-one recreation. No. I'm not looking for that with the show.
We don't want the Lion King.
We don't want the Lion King. Yeah, I don't want, like... Because I know the episodes are structured differently anyway. Like, I don't want, like, oh, here's episode 1, here's episode 2. But I still want to see, like, I want to see things... And I know there's going to be probably some shot-for-shot things that are going to happen, but I don't want it to be, like, beat for beat for beat the exact same story. Because that would feel like, why are we doing it then if it's the exact same thing?
Right.
But it needs to have the right feel. I think that's going to be most important is, are the vibes going to be right? Because that's how you really tank it. Like, special effects wise, it doesn't have to be perfect. I don't want to see 6 earthbenders bend one rock and shoot it at a guy. Like, that animation was rough from the movie. That was rough. Yeah, I feel like the bending animation was not there. And also we're now, 15 years out from that. So, CGI and special effects and things have definitely gotten to a place where you can do that well. Like, I feel like they can do bending, and I feel like they did get the child actors have some amount of training with, like, martial arts training, so that way they can do the bending, because I know a lot of the animated show drew a lot from, like, Tai Chi, from karate, Taekwondo, from all these sort of sources to create bending. So that's really what I'm looking... The main expectation is I want to like it. I want to like it. I really want to like it. Like, I'm trying to come in with the most, like... I'm reserved because we got burnt by this movie. Yes. Like, this movie was so bad that I'm burnt from that, but I'm cautiously optimistic is what I would like to say. Okay, so I just wanted to show you this one meme. In talking about vibes... this is one of the things that I've seen, and it doesn't make me, like, worried. I just thought this was amazing. So I'd like to show you this now. And then I'll explain it for the audio, an audio audience after.
What are two clips that give off the same energy?
My father has banished me until I find the Avatar. Father, when can I
I've seen this.
Yeah.
I have seen this before.
And then, so for people who are and listening to this, I showed Hannah a meme of about, like, two clips that give the same energy, and it's the live-action Zuko talking about how my father banished me, and then it's the third animated Pinocchio where it's like, father, when can I go out on my own? But one of the comments was like, do you not remember how drama, like, Zuko's a drama queen in the first season. Like, he is, he's it fits. I was like, you know what? Fits.
Yeah.
I'm here for it. So, all right. So I have a couple other questions. So now, we kind of talked about this, but, specifically looking at book one, because the first season of the show is going to cover just book one. I know that at the very least. Like, it's not going anywhere beyond that, at least to my understanding. And I know I won't say anything. I've heard about two slight, like, diff changes they're making to the general story, and I won't say anything because it doesn't seem like that you've heard that. No. Just, like, I haven't read into it, but I kind of, like, saw a headline and I was like, okay. And I was like, okay, sure. But what are things that you would want to see, specifically looking at book one, like, different or expanded on? Like, any stories, or, like, if you remember? Because I know your memory is not super great. But are there things that you'd like to see done differently, or, like, expanded, or
I actually am planning on rewatching book one before this show comes out, because I'm going to be honest, I can't remember what happened in what books.
Okay, that's fair.
I've only seen Avatar through one time. I've seen certain episodes here and there, but it's been a couple years since I've watched it, so honestly, I don't know, but I do think that what I remember about book one was, like, the interactions between Aang, Katara, and Sokka. And so I'm like, I want to see, like, that portrayed in a live format. Like, I want to feel that
friendship
that you could feel in the animated show.
Okay.
Besides that, I honestly can't remember plots.
That's fair.
Very well, so I guess I can't really say more.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
So, something that I looked this up because I was curious, but so the first season of the Netflix show is going to be 8 episodes.
Yeah.
And each episode is roughly an hour.
Okay.
So I looked at the amount of episodes that are in book one. It's 20 episodes, but each episode is about 22 minutes. Yeah. So if you look at the total time, the Netflix season one is actually slightly longer than book one, like, just in a general time-wise sense. So it's going to be roughly the same amount of time, but the distribution is going to be really different since it's 8 episodes as opposed to 20. So I'm curious about, like, I know just based on that, knowing there's 8 episodes and the fact that they're probably going to be focusing on some of the bigger aspects as opposed to, like, I know book one, a lot of it's what you would call like filler, but they're still important, like doing, like, tiny little stops, like when they go to the fortune teller, right? They go to the fortune teller, like, that's, like, one stop they make. Or when they go to they meet Bato of the water tribe, you know, like, kind of like little one-off stories that aren't necessarily, like, linked, like, big picture wise
to the main.
So, like, my thoughts are, I think some of the bigger spots are going to be focused on, like, when there's the winter solstice, right? When he meets Roku, the spirit of Roku. I feel like that's going to be one episode.
Yes.
They're going to focus on that whole story. That was, like, a 2-parter episode. So I feel like that's going to be an episode. I'm imagining they're going to get to the Northern Water Tribe by the end of the book.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if that's going to be, like, 2 episodes, because that whole series was, like, in the show was, I believe, 3 to 4 episodes were at the North Pole.
Yeah.
So, if we're going to end there, which is what I don't actually know that for sure. I just imagine that we're going to probably end in about the same spot that we started with the books, just to kind of follow the trajectory. I don't know if we're going to get there the same way, but I would imagine that could be 2 out of the 8 episodes. So then I imagine the first episode, I also feel like they're going to start it differently.
Yeah.
I think maybe the order or the way we come to that, like, first episode, I don't really want to see a shot for shot.
Same, yeah.
Same. I, like, would be okay with a slightly different, like, even if they started with the past before we get to the first episode.
Yeah.
You know, like, going with the extinction of the Air Nation, like, if we start with that, I kind of think that could be a more impactful, like, for a new audience, right? Because I feel like Avatar was very much, the cartoon was first for children. I mean, it's for everyone. Everyone can love the show, but I feel like they had to frame it more towards children, whereas I feel like this live action is maybe more of a general audience.
Right.
So they can maybe do a little bit more intensive type things that maybe they wouldn't have done, you know, with the show.
It's interesting you say that because, like, I had a couple things that came up. One was that, like, talking about potentially squeezing 3 or 4 animated episodes into one episode. We kind of have talked about this a couple times with, like, the Sister of the Traveling Pants 2 thing, where it's, like, too much context and it gets jumbled. So that's, like, a little bit of a concern depending on how they do it.
Yeah.
But with what you just said, like, I feel like because of how TV is now and how everything's basically streaming, everyone has access to it, I feel like that does change the audiences. Right. Because when the show originally started, you would have had to, like, watch it when it was on TV and, like, watch it week by week and, like, if you weren't watching cable television, you know what I mean? Like, there was less ways to access things. And I feel like now you go on Netflix and you see a random show pop up and you're like, oh, like, maybe I'll watch this, you know, where before you wouldn't just like, maybe you scroll across a random show. So I feel like that could change, like, who would be watching this.
Right.
Yeah.
Another thing that I think might be interesting is I don't know, I haven't looked too much into it because I've tried to not be too spoilered to myself about, like, story structure, but I know they've casted somebody for Azula, and I've seen an image of her, so I feel like she might be more in this season than she was in the animated show. Because in the animated show, she shows up in the finale. You're like, the Fire Lord's like, I got a task for you, because that's when Zuko and Iroh are, like, leaving the fire. You know, they're kind of, like, being about to be banished, essentially. So, and I've seen, and I don't know, but I feel like if you're going to cast someone, you probably are going to use them more.
Yes.
And that's the other thing that I'm interested in, is because in the animated show, the Fire Lord is this, like unknown kind of hidden figure. You don't even see his face until book 3. Yeah. Like, you hear him, you, like, see shadows of him, but he's a very, like, ominous, like, figure. And I feel like in the movie, he just was like, there he is. Yes. And it didn't feel good. But if you're doing live action, you can't really, like, have this hidden, like, I don't think he's gonna be, like, this hidden kind of figure. I feel like he's gonna be more prominent, but I'm curious about how they handle that in a way that feels good, right? Because, like, the movie did not work. Like, the way they set up the Fire Lord didn't feel right. It didn't feel like that character, the portrayal of him. Yeah. So I'm interested in how they're gonna handle the Fire Nation stuff. Yeah. Outside of Zuko and Iroh. Because at least in book 1, your focus was very much centered on those two, and you didn't really get the broad picture until book 2 into book 3. So I'm curious about how maybe they incorporate that a bit more as well.
I also feel like there's such a difference between a movie and having 8 episodes to flush out, like, a story. Right. And so I feel like they have creative liberties they maybe didn't have in the movie, because you're trying to shove everything into such a small thing.
I would agree.
And so I feel like that kind of makes me a little bit more optimistic that, especially if the episodes are, like, an hour long, that's, like, a pretty long time to flush out, like, a story. Right. So I feel like that makes me feel better about it. But yeah, I would be curious to see how they approach certain things.
And I don't know, have you seen images of characters who are, like, confirmed to be in the show? Because I don't want to say anything if you don't know.
I mean, I only have seen images. I didn't even know Daniel Day-Kim was in it until you just said that.
Oh, you didn't? Okay. I thought that was okay, because the Fire Lord's a
it's not
figure.
like I'm not like, I didn't know, but, like, I just hadn't heard that. But I really have only seen images of Aang, Katara,
Okay.
Zuko and Sokka.
Okay. I won't say
So besides
anything,
that, I don't know who
So
else.
I've seen images of 2 to 3 other characters who were in book 1.
Right.
And like are like live action.
I mean,
So,
I would imagine like Iroh.
Yeah. Well, yeah, he was
Like, obviously, he's a big part.
Like, for instance, I don't think it's a spoiler that, like, the Kyoshi Warriors are showing
Right.
up.
That's
Like, that
not a
one,
shocker
I saw an image of that. I saw an image of a character from a later episode, but I'm not surprised to see that character. Like, I'm like, okay, that episode was important enough that they're going to cover that. So I'm like, I wonder which episodes they decide to keep, or if they're going to do new stories. Like, in the same, like, traveling from the South Pole to the North Pole, if we get a new characters, new stories, or if it's only going to be specifically things that we've seen but maybe structured in a different way, is what I'm curious about. Another question I have: do you think any of the original show voice casts are going to cameo in this show?
I could see it, because I feel like a lot of shows, not even just shows that have done animated to live action, but like I've seen it in like a lot of CW superhero shows. They'll bring like a previous version of like Supergirl. Her mom in the show was the original Supergirl, like in a movie in the 80s.
Okay.
And we saw you've seen it with like Arrow had like one of the guys who's played Batman. So like you'll see cameos like that. I wouldn't be surprised to see like 1 or 2 of them, like even if they're just like in a background shot.
Right. Or just like a random character.
I wouldn't be surprised to see them. No, that wouldn't surprise me.
Okay. I was also like, I haven't heard or read anything about that, but I was like, I could see that being like a nod, like, hey, like,
well,
it's
also the thing of would I recognize them, because I've seen
for instance, I would recognize Mae Whitman.
Well, yes.
Yeah, or Dante Bosco.
Yeah,
who played
and
Zuko.
I've seen interviews and clips, and so I've seen them, but it's like I don't know if just from like I would recognize them like a background. Obviously, if Mae Whitman popped up, I'd be like, oh yeah, it's Mae Whitman.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that would be curious to see.
And I'm like, the last time I saw the voice actor from Sokka, Jack DeSanta, was on All That, like 15 years
it's
ago.
Like, what do they even
I don't know
look
what he
like?
looks like now.
So I would be curious to see if I actually recognize them.
Yeah, I was curious about that. The only other thing, so here's my last question that I have, because the creators did leave the show. So we know that they were involved at least with structuring initially, and then I think they were working on it for about a year before they left. Then they said creative differences, and I will just tell you that I saw one of the creators at the premiere, so he went to the premiere. So it doesn't seem like they went out on bad terms.
Right.
I wonder, I've read a little bit into it, because I know that they also are now running Avatar Studios, right? Yes. And I don't know exactly the timeline of maybe that came up while they were working on this, and maybe they weren't like super happy. I don't know if maybe it was an issue with Netflix, the company, and not necessarily
and they wanted
like,
to have their own control.
Yeah, like more creative freedom. So I just like that. I think has given me the most caution.
Yes.
Going into this is because I know we know how the movie went. Like they weren't really involved at all with that, and we saw what happened. And I remember when I read an article that they had left, that made me pause, and I was like, ooh. Because I know Netflix has done, and I don't really have a good scope to know, but Netflix did, for instance, they did live action Cowboy Bebop.
Yes.
That was not well received.
No.
They also did live action, like a movie of Death Note, which is an anime, and I know like that wasn't well received. But they did another show. I'm not familiar with really any of these shows. One Piece. Yes. They did a live action One Piece, and that one was really well received. One is well received. Yes. The live action came out last year, so I know like the track record is kind of all over the place, where it seems like it really depends on a show-to-show basis. Yes. The interpretation of how people receive it. So I'm coming in cautiously optimistic, but I do have to give a little pause by the fact that they left. That makes me a little nervous.
Yeah. I think if they left because, let's say, like, they had differences with Netflix, the company, that might not be the biggest thing because they could still have a lot of the elements they came up
with.
They just didn't want to work with the company.
Right.
If it's because they left because they just didn't like... But I have to imagine if one of the guys went to the premiere...
Yeah.
He wouldn't show up unless he was, like...
At least, like, happy enough. Like, I don't know. I didn't look into it. I don't know if they went to the movie premiere, like if that's something they were invited to and went to, you know. It might just be a support of their, because they created that universe.
Unless he just went to the premiere to be like, wow, look how shitty this is now that I'm not here. I don't know. But I mean, I'm always one to be like, I'll give it a chance.
Yeah. Yeah, cautiously optimistic is where I've stayed for the past couple of weeks. I've definitely read something and been like, interesting, and then I'm like, let me just read the headline because it showed up, and then I'm not going to read the article because I don't want to know.
So I don't know. I mean, obviously we'll have to wait till we see the product.
Yes, which will be next week.
Right,
it'll be soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything else. Those are like the main questions I had. Did you have anything else?
I only wrote down 2 questions.
Okay.
One of them was basically the expectations.
Okay.
This question I have is basically like, what elements are you excited to see done in live action compared to animated, and what elements make you go like, ugh? Okay.
I think things that I'm interested to see in live action, like a live action Avatar Kyoshi is like high up on that list. Like, I want a live action, like 8 foot tall, like 200-year-old Avatar Kyoshi. I really hope like that, like some of the cities I'd like to see, because like the Kyoshi Warriors weren't in the live action movie. Right. They got skipped over, so we didn't even get to see that in live action. So some of the like specific, like, and this is where it's both could be really good or really bad, like set pieces.
Yes. Because
I've seen the costumes of like the characters in costume. And I don't want to say they feel cosplay, but they feel like it's like direct from show to live action, and not necessarily like this is an outfit somebody would actually wear,
like
which
an
is
interpretive,
which is fine. Yeah, like I'm like not a problem, but I'm curious about like looking at like set pieces of this world, like for instance the North Pole being this like icy, you know, basically a giant ice castle, ice palace. And so, like, I'm curious about, like, that. I also am interested in, like, things with the spirit world.
Yes.
Because I feel like they could do a lot with the spirit world in live action that would be really interesting.
Yeah.
What gives me pause, and what has always given me pause, is the bending.
Yeah.
Is the animated... Because if you're doing bending in an animation, you have so much control over the way it looks, the way it feels, like the weight of it all. With live action, which is what we saw with the animated... Or what we saw with the live action movie is... You'd have people, like, punching or doing motions, and then thered be, like, a rock that flies through the air, or, like... you know, wind that kind of, you know, so I feel like the bending, it has, like, that's where I'm the most nervous, because it's like, if the effects aren't right, it's not gonna, like, there's no weight behind it, then it doesn't feel right. Same thing with the Avatar state. The Avatar state, and I don't know, like, how that is gonna look, or how that's gonna feel. I feel like that could be either really good or really bad. I'm really excited to see a better version of Appa, because Appa in the movie was so gross. Like, made me sick to my stomach. He was rough. So I'm really, like, pleased. I have seen a picture of Appa. I am more pleased than I was with the live action. I guess, I'm trying to think if there's anything that I think would be, like, better in live, like, I guess, like, character interactions. I feel like sometimes with a real person, it feels more like expressions, right? You get their expressions, you get these, like, I don't know, like, it feels more real. I mean, it is real people, so I think maybe maybe more focus on characters in a, like, more emphasis on these relationships, because again, like, for instance, the Kyoshi Warriors episode, it's 20 minutes. You meet Suki, you meet these Kyoshi Warriors, you're in this village, 20 minutes, that's it. Whereas, like, if we have a whole hour with them, like, think of how much more developed you could get with Avatar Kyoshi, with these, like, this, like, island. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like you can build more of, like, a dynamic with these characters in a way that you couldn't in, like, a serialized animated show. So I think, like, mainly that's what I feel most optimistic about is, like, character interactions and building these relationships.
Yeah. I mean, I think, like, the ones I'm nervous about, like you said, is, like, how they'll do the airbending or, like, water bending. Like, because I feel, when I think about TV shows and movies, like, superhero shows, like, I think about The Flash, and I think about, like, how some of the CGI and how they did some of, like, the speed running is a little, like, ooh, as compared to Batman, where he mostly does fighting and, like, gadgets, which is easier to do on a screen, easier to portray.
Yeah.
So I kind of think about that. That makes me nervous. I also think, I kind of had the same thing about the animals. Like, it's hard to show expression, emotion, like emotive on animals that aren't animated.
Right.
Like we talked about Dumbo.
Yeah.
How like the animated Dumbo, there's so much emotion, and then the real one, it's like, ooh. So that is like a little bit, I'm curious to see how they'll do that. I'm really interested, like you said, to see maybe more of the emotion from the characters because it is live action, and I'm actually really excited to see some of, like, the fight sequences.
Yeah, I like the choreography.
Yeah, because I think it's been a while, so they have, like you said, things have advanced in, like, how they shoot scenes and stuff like that. But also just, like, some of the elements of, like, fight scenes, I don't know if you can do it in animated the way you can do it in live action.
Right.
So I'm curious to see how they'll approach those things.
The other thing that I think is interesting and actually probably works for the better is that even in book 1, like, Katara is literally learning to bend water the whole book. Like, she's just starting, so she's not gonna be an expert, and I shouldn't expect that. I'm not expecting that. Same with Sokka. Sokka's like, he's young, he's learning. Like, I like that. I like the idea that it gets better as they grow and as the show goes along. So I feel like it doesn't need to be amazing. Yeah. But it has to look good. Yeah. And it has to feel right.
And, like, it can still, it's like this weird thing of it can still look good as they're, like, learning.
Right.
Because there is, like, that awkwardness and, like, that trying to figure out things.
Yeah. The other thing, and I talked about this briefly, but there's the episode The Storm, which basically covers, the whole episode is focusing on Zuko and Aang's backstory past and how they are the same in a lot of ways. They're having the same sort of journey, just on different, in different ways. And that episode, I think, is probably one of the best episodes of the show, if not the best episode of that season. So I need that to be done right. And I don't know if they cover it differently or how they're going to approach it, but, like, we need to set up, like, Zuko's past and present, like, set that timeline right. Because I think that if it's not done right, it's not going to hit well. Yeah. Like, it's not going to feel right. So I need, like, the character development needs to feel right, too. Like, they have to feel right. Like, I don't need to be, like, the exact same, like, this happens and then I learned this, or this happened and I learned this. But it needs to feel, the progression needs to feel the same. Like, we need to start, like, Sokka's got to be a bit, like, full of himself, and be a little humbled, and then, like, come into his own with his strengths, you know? Like, these characters need to start, I feel like, and follow the same kind of pathway journey, even if it's not exactly the same way, but, like, that's what I'm also, like, I'm like, that episode, that, like, that has to be done right, or it's not going to feel right. Same with Iroh. Iroh has got to be it, too. Yeah. I need to see him being my favorite uncle. If he's not, I'll be upset. But the actor seems like he like, just visually seems like an Iroh type. Yeah. Has the warmth of, like, that character.
Screw you, Uncle Fred. Move away for Uncle Iroh.
Move away for Iroh, my favorite uncle. So it's like, there's things that I'm excited for to see in live action. Yeah. And even, like, the air temples, right? Yeah. Like, I'd love to see the way those, like, how they've designed it. Because, like, live action gives a lot of, like, interpretation can be done differently, right? You can interpret the way something looks differently in a way that's more interesting or more realistic. So that, I think, I'm excited for.
Yeah.
Like how they decide to stylize like set design. If it looks like a stage set, I'm gonna be sad. We'll see.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. All right, so that covers our pre-discussion.
Yeah.
Hope you enjoyed this episode of Research Break. We will be back after the first episode.
Yes.
We're going to watch the first episode when it comes out, and then we're going to regroup, and we're going to talk about our thoughts.
Yeah.
And go from there.
Yeah, we, if you want to reach us before then, we have our email, r3podcast@gmail.com. We have Instagram, and we have Letterboxd. If anyone wants to let us know that they're also watching the show.
Yeah, or have any insight or anything you want us to discuss, any questions for us, or impressions that you want to share with us to then, add to our discussion. We'd love to hear it. I know a lot of my friends watch Avatar, have seen it, and are planning on watching the live action, so if you listen to this, feel free to pass it along, or even if you don't know us, email us or DM us on Instagram, and we read those, so.
Tell us your favorite character.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. But yeah, we will be back with a new Research Break after the first episode.
Be back soon. Bye.
Bye.
We would like to thank Joseph McDade for our intro music. He provides free music available for all kinds of creative use. The song that we used is called Sunrise Expedition, and you can find it and his other music on his website, josephmcdade.com. If you would like to reach us, you can email us at r3podcasts@gmail.com. That's R, the number 3, podcasts@gmail.com. Or you can find us on Instagram by searching Research Rank Repeat.